Do you think he could garner some support, though, on this basis, that people look at the government's renewables plan and say that in itself is a drastic change? There's too much in terms of transmission lines all over the country, and the energy source is yet to prove reliable as a form of baseload power.
Well, we need to, as well as investing in renewables, of course, we need to make sure that we're investing in batteries and transmission lines. And as we've said, gas will have a role in the transition as well. I think it's a bit far-fetched to say that renewables are yet to be proven. I mean, we have, Tasmania is pretty much 100% renewables with its hydroelectricity. We've got South Australia that gets into very high rates of renewables on some days. But yeah, you have to have firming and you have to have transmission lines as well to make sure that the energy gets into people's homes and businesses effectively.
Well, one of his arguments, Peter Dutton, is you're relying on the government's relying on green hydrogen working as a fuel source in the future, and it may not work. What do you say to that?
Yeah, well, we're investing in green hydrogen because we know that it works, but it's not working in a cost-effective way yet. We need to make sure that as this technology develops, we can bring the costs down, because when we bring the costs down, it can have a really good role in manufacturing those high energy intensity things like steel and cement and industrial chemicals and so on. We want to see green hydrogen proved up, but we're not relying on green hydrogen for powering people's homes. I mean, Australians have worked out that solar is a good investment. More than 3 million Australian homes have put solar on their own roofs. We know that we've got renewable energy projects approved that will power millions more homes. We've got the capacity to make sure that that becomes a really significant part of our energy network. We're aiming for 82% of our energy coming from renewables.
The Liberals are also throwing Bob Hawke at you. They say the former Labor hero was a big advocate for nuclear. Did he have it wrong?
I love Bob Hawke, and I'd occasionally have lunch with him, and we would talk about nuclear. I didn't agree with everything that Bob Hawke did or said in his whole life. It doesn't mean I don't respect him and adore him. I just don't agree with him on nuclear.
Well, let's talk about these social media memes that became a controversy during the week, fish with 3 eyes, etc. The PM says lighten up, but don't you think that stuff's a bit over the top?
No, not really. I think people have got a sense of humour, and it's fine to express it in their own social media streams. I think it's a bit strange that Peter Dutton, having run around the country during the Voice referendum saying, give us the details, would object to people calling for the details on how his expensive, risky nuclear plan is going to work.
All right, and Jim Chalmers went as far last week as to say this is dumb policy. He said it was stupidity. Do you agree?
Well, I think it's completely irrational, and it's designed to be a distraction. I mean, Peter Dutton illustrated his policy, I believe, with a 7-year-old picture from Rolls-Royce of a concept plan, of a nuclear plan. I mean, how can we take him seriously when there is so little detail, including no cost for what it's going to cost to build these things, and no estimate of what power from these reactors is going to cost? I mean, it's no wonder that people can't take it seriously. He's not taking Australians seriously if he's putting out policies that are uncosted with so little detail.
All right, perhaps as a response to some of those things occurring, Peter Dutton yesterday called the PM a child in a man's body. What's your reaction to that?
Well, that was the same speech where he was calling for mature debate, and he's, gone straight to the personal attacks. I think that speaks for itself.
As Environment Minister, you're often given the task, as you pointed out, of approving these renewables projects, including wind farms. And earlier this year, you knocked back a project called the Warora Station wind farm because of a flying fox habitat. Are nature considerations going to get in the way in terms of the ambitious renewables rollout that you want, get in the way of what you see as climate action?
Well, I've approved 54 and I've essentially knocked back 2. And the reason I've knocked them back is because they were going to have an unacceptable impact on nature. The wind farm you're talking about, it wasn't just about the flying foxes, it was right on the edge of a World Heritage area, and it had a particular type of forest that is quite rare. There's not much of it left. So it was important habitat for flying foxes. It was important habitat for a whole range of creatures and plants, but it also provided a really important buffer to protect that World Heritage area from incursion of feral animals and weeds and so on. So, yeah, it's a bit more complicated than just the flying foxes, but I have to be prepared to knock back proposals that are in the wrong place or that will have an unacceptable impact on nature. And I've been very clear with the renewable energy sector that we want to see renewable energy projects, but we want to see the right projects in the right places. And we've issued guidance to renewable energy or wind companies in particular to say this is what good practice looks like, this is how you build something that minimises its impact on nature, and we really do want to work with renewable energy companies to make sure that we get this cheaper, cleaner energy into the grid, but we do it in a way that has minimal impacts on our natural environment.
On the other side of the coin, I guess you regularly cop flack from the Greens for approving coal mines at a time when the government is supposed to be about phasing out coal. You've approved 4, I believe, as Minister. Why have you done that, and how do you respond to the criticism?
Well, the way we get carbon pollution down in this country is through the safeguard mechanism that the Teals and the Greens have worked on with the government. That's how we get to net zero in this country. There will be, during the transition in particular, a role, as we've said, for gas. We're getting to 82% renewable energy in our grid, but 82% is not 100%. So we're not going to switch off the lights around Australia. We need to do this as a transition. If you look globally, I think this is really interesting. 20 years ago, it took a year to put a gigawatt of solar power into our energy grids around the world. It took a year to do that. Last year, there were some days when we were adding a gigawatt of solar power a day globally. This transition is real. It is happening. We know that the previous government was told that 24 coal-fired power stations were closing down. They did nothing to prepare for the energy gaps that would emerge as those coal-fired power stations closed down. We are dealing with that by making sure that we can get those renewables into our grid, that we can have firming, that we, do this in an orderly way so we can keep the lights on. But when it comes to what's happening in our energy market in Australia, I think the direction is clear. The only risk to that is Peter Dutton coming up with this thought bubble that he's not prepared to cost or share details of.
We're almost out of time. We had an announcement from you on long-awaited changes to the environment protections a couple of months back. You're setting up a new Commonwealth Environment Protection Agency, but a broader overhaul of the EPBC Act is coming later. It was reported at the time as pressure from the resources sector had led to this kind of more cautious, staged approach. Is that a fair characterisation? No, it's really not. We're doing the second phase of our nature law reform at the moment. So last year we did the first tranche of laws which established the nature repair market and expanded the water trigger, which is the protection within environment law for water resources like groundwater that might be affected by coal or coal seam gas or other forms of gas extraction. We've done that. That's already passed through the Parliament. We've now got the second phase of our environmental law before the Parliament, and as you said, that establishes Australia's
first Environment Protection Agency. It gives that agency stronger powers and stronger penalties if there's deliberate destruction of the environment. It, for the first time anywhere in the world, defines what nature positive looks like. And it does a number of other important things. The third tranche of our laws we're still working on. We've had consultations with more than 100 interested organisations. That includes business organisations, but it also, of course, includes environmental organisations, First Nations organisations. We've had more than 3,000 people participate in online forums on the nature law reform. It is a big job. I mean, the current Act is well over 1,000 pages, so you can imagine the size and the complexity of the laws that we're talking about. We want to make sure we get them right. It's a complex drafting task. We want to make sure we get it right.
All right, just finally, do you rule out a deal with the crossbench and the Greens on a climate trigger?
It always makes me nervous when you start with, will you roll out? Will you rule out? Yeah. Very nervous.
Would you rule out a climate trigger as part of those reforms?
Well, the way that we deal with carbon pollution and getting it down in this country is through the safeguard mechanism. That's already passed through the Parliament. That's how we get to net zero in this country. But I have said that we are open to further discussions about how we reflect the impact of climate change in the third tranche of laws. People will have every opportunity to have a look at that very closely when I release the exposure draft of the legislation, before anybody is expected to vote on it in the Parliament. So people can calm right down about all this stuff.
Well, it sounds like there'll be a climate trigger perhaps then.
No, as I said, we're still negotiating on the third tranche of legislation. It's a big and complex job. And I'm not going to... we're getting the second tranche through the Parliament at the moment. That's my focus. That's my focus right now.
Environment Minister Tanya Plibersek, thanks for your time this morning.
Yeah, no worries, Andrew. Lovely to talk to you.